Hi, I'm Rick Stivers from YoungMartin'sReels, and today we're going to be working on, well, we're going to be working on two reels, but one all at the same time. We have two reels here. This one is a Zebco FL44, and this one is a Zebco Omega 154. The the FL44 has actually a 154 cover on it, but it's the flip and pitch, and I've gone through the schematics for these two, and they are practically the same reel all the way down. On a few parts there is a change in part number, but if you look at the pictures, they're practically identical, and I really think that these parts could be interchanged. So we're going to be taking apart the one that was requested, which is the 154, but if you've got one of these FL44s, you can do it exactly the same way. So we're going to set that off to the side, and we're going to work on this one. The first thing we're going to do is remove the cover. Then we're going to remove the rotor off of it. Now this was one thing I did find different between this one and the FL44. If you look, you pop this cover off and take a look, the spinner heads are slightly different. This one's got like a cutout on it, like they did it to balance it, and this one doesn't have that. So that's one of the few differences I've seen. I don't know that would make any difference in the performance whatsoever, but that was one difference I noted. One other thing I wanted to show you on this FL44, I didn't realize it when I first popped it off, but about 10-15 years ago my dad had me make him some wooden collars to go on these rotors on my wood lathe, and he epoxied them in place to replace the rubber ones or plastic that had dry rotted and fallen off. So this is one from a long time ago that's still out there functioning and still going. Just wanted to let you guys see it. All right, the next thing we're going to do is take out this clip right here. Make sure it doesn't go shooting across the room. All right, and I'm going to try to maintain the reel pretty much in this position the rest of the time. Okay, with that off, we can now take this drag washer off, followed up by this plastic drag washer, or Teflon, depending on which material it actually is. It's probably a Teflon. Next, we're going to pull off the rotor, the spool. On the bottom of the spool, there's another Teflon washer and another one of these Teflon washers, the metal and a Teflon. And then below that, we have the clicker and drag assembly plate. With those removed, now let's go ahead and take the handle off. Now we're going to take out these three screws. All three of these screws are the same length. With that removed, we're going to remove the back cover. That's going to expose our gear train assembly. And this is where people begin to have difficulty. What we're going to do is we're going to zoom in close so you can see the configuration, how this is set up in here. I think we're going to add a little light to the situation. Alright, with this like this, now you can see what's going on in here a little bit better. Now when you look inside here, you're going to have three basic components. You've got this washer right here. It's a very thin, almost a shim size washer right here. Beside that, we're going to have this spring, and we're going to get more into that depth in that spring in a little bit. But there you've got this spring, and then you've got this assembly right beside it here. You see it right there. That is your drag assembly for your anti-reverse. So we're going to put all those back in that position, but if you notice, let's see if we can see it in there. Let's see if you can look down in there. Okay, right down in here is your anti-reverse pawl, and it sits inside a little square hole down there, and we're going to put that in, reinstall all this. But prior to doing that, we're going to go ahead and pull all this out. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to slide this bearing or bushing out the side. Just pry it over. It will usually go. If it doesn't go easily, add a little lubricant to it. Okay? Once that one's done, come to the other side and let's slide it out also. Push it up inside there a little bit. That should release this assembly all the way across. With that done, you should be able to grab the main gear and lift this straight out. Now, you should be able to see that pawl down inside there. Let's turn it so you can see it. It's not very clean, so it makes it pretty hard to see, but that's our pawl assembly right there. And it sits into a square hole. Okay, we're going to lift it out. Let's see the orientation it's in. Yeah, it's so dirty you can't see it down inside that black case. Let's wipe it off so you can see its shape. There we go. It looks like that, nice and shiny. Okay, and when it's installed, it will sit right down into that hole. Just like that. All right, with that done, we'll go ahead and take that out for now because we don't want to lose it. With that done, we're now going to remove this pin here on your trigger assembly. And for that job, I have this little pin that I've made. And you just get on it. And I need to lose a little more force. I don't want to hammer on it, so we're going to snap it into a pair of vice grips and use that to press with. And push it in. There we go. And the pin comes out. Now, this assembly slides downward. It's in the picture. There we go. Slides downward, comes out, and slides out. And now it's ready for cleaning. Now, with that done, we can remove this assembly. The only thing that leaves in there is this switch assembly over here. And this one doesn't want to turn. So, let's give it a little help. Wow. Alright, we may have to help that a little bit. Okay. There's a C-clip right down in here. We're going to take that C-clip and pop it out. Okay, don't lose it. And this is not your standard C-clip by any means. If you look at it, it's actually a bent C-clip. And it goes in there with the bend facing over towards the handle of the switch. With that off, you should hopefully be able to push this through. There we go. Let's slide that all the way out. That one definitely needed to come out. Normally, this is something you wouldn't have to take off. But it's so caked up full of dirt and grease in there that it didn't want to switch back and forth. So we've taken it out. We're going to clean up the hole that it goes in. The other one is your drag. We don't really need to take that out as long as it's spinning free. And what I mean by spinning free is you have to be able to turn it this way, but at the same time, you should be able to put a screwdriver on that screw head and be able to turn the screw head without it moving the knob. And you can. So that one we're going to leave in place. And on the bottom side over here, we've got a bearing right here. And we're going to take that bearing and we're going to pop it out of there. Pushing out, from the inside, from the front. Okay, with the bearing out, we can now clean it. That has all the parts off that we're going to remove. And what we're going to do, I'm going to back out. I'm going to spray everything down with WD-40, which is a very good penetrant and cleaner. And then we're going to go through and scrub all these parts and get them all nice and clean. And then we're going to come back and reassemble everything. So we're going to be on silent mode, fast forward while we clean it. And when we come back, I'll go back to regular mode while we reassemble everything. Oh, let's go ahead and go through this real quick. All right, this is the assembly I was explaining to you a while ago. This is your anti-reverse. And first thing we've got here is this washer, which is almost a shim. It's really, really thin. Okay, then you've got this spring assembly right here. Okay, and the spring is not installed properly. How do you like that? You can see this clip on the spring right here? That should be over here in this slot right there. Okay, with that in the slot, the rest of the spring should pull down and over it. Like so, to hold it in place, and then the washer goes over it. So the spring goes in the slot, down to the post. You see? Back it up. Okay. In the slot, down to the post, comes out and around, and then squares off here, and ends up right there. All right, this little tab right here is what's going to fit inside the anti-reverse pawl right there. Okay, as it moves, okay, it's what's going to turn that and make it come in and lock. When it goes this direction, it will disengage, and when it goes this direction, it will engage. All right, so let's take this all apart. We're going to clean everything up, re-lubricate, re-grease, inspect everything, inspect the gears. The gears all look really good. So we're going to clean this up and be back with you in just a few moments. But in the meantime, we're going to silent mode. Alright, now we're ready to assemble. First thing we're going to do is put the bearing back in, the back of it here. We're going to lubricate that with some oil. It's a shielded bearing, but it's not a sealed bearing. So we lubricate it, slip it in the hole, push it in nice and easily and firmly, and it's installed. Next is going to come your pinion gear with your axle shaft here. And it's got a little bit of corrosion up here, so let's go ahead. I know I said I had everything clean, but I lied. There, that looks much better. You don't want to put it in if it's got any kind of rough spots. So I'm going to put a little bit of oil on the shaft here where it goes through, because it tends to not be as slow if you do that. The next thing I'm going to do is put on some fishing reel grease onto the pinion gear. With that done, we can now reinstall it back through the bearing. Make sure it snaps down and back up. That's good. All right. The next thing that's going to go back in is this arm. So again, that's something we don't want to be binding, so we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of oil on it, not a lot. We don't want it dripping out, but we do want to put some on there. And we're going to slide that up inside like that. And then we're going to reinstall the pin. Now the pin should have one side of it that is just slightly beveled, and it does. If it doesn't, you can still put it in. Okay, get it started in the hole, and I like to squeeze it down with a pair of vice grips or pliers. Alright, with that in place, there we go. With this trigger assembly in and properly installed, the next thing is going to be to put this switch back in. Where we took this out. And it's important for it to go ahead and go in now. You can put it in later, but if you do, if you take it out later, you're going to have a little more difficulty putting the clip in. And you see this notch right here? You're going to have to make sure that that switch end lands inside this notch right here. Okay, so let's go ahead now and put the switch in and reinstall the C-clip. There we go. C-clip's installed. With the C-clip installed, we're ready to put this assembly back in. Let's go ahead. First thing we're going to do is install the drag plate. It goes over top, just as I showed you earlier. Then goes the spring assembly. Okay, remember that the notch goes into that groove, or knot, or hole slot, cut in the assembly, and then stretch the spring out over the shoulder. So that it sits like that. Now this spring has an important purpose. You might look at it and say, well, I don't understand. It doesn't seem to do anything. What it's doing, when you put it in here, it's creating resistance. So that when you turn this, there's going to be resistance to hold this plate in place. Without the spring, this plate will just sit in one place and it won't do anything. So that spring needs to be on there to provide resistance against this shoulder. With that switch installed, the next thing we're going to be installing is the anti-reverse dog. And remember, this little tab here fits down into that slot. Little square hole. Alright. With that installed, we now, let's add a little grease to this assembly and install the washer. That'll help hold the washer in place. Okay, so now we have the anti-reverse dog down inside the hole. We want to take this V right here and set that over top of this switch that we just installed. And if everything is installed properly, and it's not, because this should rotate forward. There it goes. Should rotate forward and not backwards. There we go. Sometimes it's a little stiff. And there we go. Remember, it's trying to turn without the bushings. Alright. Nope, the anti-reverse is not working. There it goes. Okay, there. Now it is. Okay. So, make sure that V is over there. Make sure your anti-reverse dog is in place down here. And then you're going to come back and install your bushings. Now I find, in order to get this to go in best, go ahead and slide the handle on and push. And that pops that one in place. Go to the other side and do the same thing. There we go. Now all of that should be in place. And there we go. We have anti-reverse and we wind. And boy, it winds smooth, easy. Take the back cover, slide it back in, and reinstall your 3 screws. Now it's time to install the drag plate. Now, you're going to look at this and see this hole over here, and you're going to see this screw slot over here, and think that the long tab on this is supposed to go into the hole instead of the screw tab. And that's not true. This little short one goes into this, and the long one goes on this side. If you try to do it the other way, you will never get the spool back on. Okay, so put the long tab over here and drop it into the screwdriver slot that's on the drag adjust over here. With that in place, now we're going to move over, and this, you notice the grease has changed colors because I'm using a drag grease over here, and we're going to put this on very sparingly. We're going to put on the drag grease, we're going to put on the metal drag washer, give it just a little bit of lubricant. We're going to put on the Teflon. Now technically, because they're Teflon, you should not have to lubricate them, but I find that if they're not lubricated and they get into a heavy drag situation, it tends to tear them up. So let's go ahead and lubricate it. Lubricate the bottom of the spool. Now how do you tell the top from the bottom? The top side is not going to have these little serrations around it. Those serrations ride right here on this. That's the clicker. Okay? So that when your drag is moving, you're going to hear that tick, 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 tick. That's that little clicker right there moving on these serrations. Okay? You can go ahead and add a little bit of grease to the clicker if you want. Bottom side down, slide it in. Next, we're going to put on another drag washer. Time for a little bit more drag reel grease. Put on your Teflon washer. Then put on your metal washer. Remember, it's got to go into these 3 slots. There's 6 slots on there. Only 3 of them are used at any time. So you can put on any of the 3 that you want. Okay. Then comes your spring clip. All right. With that on, we're down to just putting this rotor back on. Let's go ahead and put some oil on the rotor button so that this will activate smoothly and easily inside here for many years to come. Screw it on. Nice and snug. Now we're ready to put the handle on. Now this handle will fit either side. You can put it on this side or you can put it on this side. Either side, so it's an ambidextrous reel. You can use it on whichever hand you want. Typically though, it's on the left-hand side. Put the knob on. All right, and if we had line on here that was worth anything, we'd pull it out. And, well, we're going to need to pull some out. I'm going to re-spool this with new line because this old line is old and dry rotted. Okay, slide that on. There we go. Now let's see if everything works as advertised. Okay. Got a good drag. That's tightened up. Loosen it up. Good. spools up, spins. All it needs now is some new line. Okay, one thing else we forgot to check, besides the drag, is the anti-reverse switch. Remember we had so much trouble with this switch? So we need to see, look at there. It turns the anti-reverse off, and that turns the anti-reverse back on. So the switch is working too. There you have it, Daniel. You requested this reel be done, and that's exactly what I did. And I hope you find this useful. If anybody out there likes this video, please hit the like button. If you dislike it, hey, that's great. Hit the dislike button and tell me why you dislike it. Either way, I love to see the comments. I'm meeting all kinds of people across the world. So if you want to see more like this, hit the subscribe button. And for Young Martin's Reel, this is Rick Stivers signing out.